My name is Eleanor Grant. I am 72 years old, a widow, and the owner of a small house at the edge of Portland, Oregon. My late husband, Tom, and I spent 30 years running a laundromat together. We built it from nothing, just 2 tired hands and $100 borrowed from his brother. Every stain we scrubbed, every coin we counted was a little piece of our life story. When Tom passed away, the silence in the house grew louder than the machines ever had. But I stayed. I kept the routines. I brewed coffee at 6, read the paper, and checked the mail, even when I knew it would only bring bills. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind people mistake for peace. Then one Sunday afternoon, my son David and his wife Melissa came by. David wore his usual confidence like armor. Melissa scrolled through her phone, barely looking up. He said they just wanted to check in, make sure I was doing all right. But I knew that tone. I had heard it before, right before every request for money. I poured him a cup of coffee the way I always did and told him I still had some savings set aside. David laughed. Not a chuckle, not a polite smile, a full, careless laugh, head thrown back as if I'd said something absurd. He laughed at me. "Mom," he said, shaking his head, "you don't need to worry about money anymore. That's what family's for. We've got you covered now, right, honey?" Melissa didn't even look up. She just murmured something that could have meant anything. I stood there holding the cup between my hands, feeling the warmth fade. My own son, my boy, who once cried when I left him at kindergarten, was now laughing at the idea that I could still make choices, that I could still have control. In that moment, I realized something cold and clear. It wasn't about money. It was about power. And for the first time in my life, I saw my reflection not as a mother or a widow, but as a woman who had quietly had others write her story. That day, I decided to take the pen back. 3 days after that visit, the phone rang while I was making tea. The number on the screen showed my bank. I almost didn't answer. I thought it might be another promotion or survey, but something inside me said to pick up. "Mrs. Grant?" a calm male voice asked. "This is Philip Sanders, Senior Account Manager at Riverdale Bank. I just wanted to confirm a few changes recently submitted to your account." "Changes," I repeated. My heart slowed. "What kind of changes?" He hesitated, polite but firm. "There was a request to update the account ownership and assign a new primary. Your son, David Grant." I gripped the edge of the counter. "And did those changes go through?" "No. Your signature was required, and it was missing. So everything remains under your control. I flagged the request for review, but I wanted to verify directly with you." "Thank you," I said quietly. "No changes are authorized. None." He paused for a moment. "I'll note that, Mrs. Grant. And if anything similar happens again, you'll be notified immediately." When I hung up, the house felt too still. I set the teacup down untouched. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, my own breathing, steady but heavy. David had gone that far. My own son trying to take control behind my back. He hadn't asked because he assumed I wouldn't understand, or worse, that I wouldn't notice. I walked to the drawer by the sink and pulled out my old blue notebook, the one Tom used to call our little ledger of life. I flipped to a blank page and wrote carefully in ink. October 3rd. Philip from the bank called. David tried to change the accounts. I am still the owner. Then I underlined the last 4 words twice. Still the owner. For the first time in a long while, I felt the faint spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not sadness. It was awareness. A quiet kind of strength waking up after too much silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind tapping the old window pane. Every sound in the house seemed sharper now, more alive. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the heater, even the faint whisper of the curtains moving. It wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was something deeper, something new. For the first time in years, I wasn't just existing. I was awake. When Tom died, I told myself survival meant keeping the peace. Don't argue, don't make noise, don't draw attention. Just nod, agree, and stay small. That had become my shield. But now I saw how that silence had cost me my confidence, my authority, my name. The next morning, I brewed tea instead of coffee. Earl Grey, strong with a slice of lemon, the way Tom liked it. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open beside me. The page from last night stared back at me, simple and clear. I am still the owner. Those 4 words were small, but they held power. They were proof that I still had a say in my own life. I wasn't invisible, not yet. I began to make a list, not of groceries or bills, but of things I had allowed others to control. Decisions about money, holidays, repairs, even where I spent Thanksgiving. My son called it help. I now saw it for what it was: quiet control dressed as concern. By the time the morning light spilled across the table, I'd filled half the page. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. I didn't know exactly what I would do next, but I knew I would not sit back and let someone else decide it for me. My silence had once been love. Now it would become strategy. 2 days later, I drove to the bank. The morning air was cold and clean, and the streets were still damp from rain. I parked across the street and watched people move in and out of the building. Young couples, office workers, a mother pushing a stroller. Everyone looked like they had somewhere important to be. I wondered when I'd stopped feeling that way. Inside, the bank smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. At the front desk, a young teller looked up, her smile practiced. Before I could say anything, a man stepped forward. "Mrs. Grant?" he asked, extending a hand. "Philip Sanders," we spoke on the phone. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his 30s, with kind eyes and a tie slightly loosened, the kind of person who tried to make formality feel human. I shook his hand and followed him into a small glass office at the back. A fern sat in the corner, half alive. He gestured for me to sit. "I reviewed your account this morning," he said, tapping his keyboard. "You've been with us a long time, 38 years to exact." "Consistency," I said softly, "is underrated." He smiled faintly. Then his tone turned professional again. "The forms your son submitted weren't minor updates. He requested full authority, power of attorney, card access, control of the trust." I didn't flinch. I'd already guessed as much. Still, hearing it aloud made something in my chest settle hard and cold. "He assumed I wouldn't notice," I said quietly. Philip nodded. "We declined the request. Of course, your signature is still required, and all accounts remain under your sole control." I exhaled slowly. "But then I'd like to make a few changes myself." He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "We can update beneficiaries, remove secondary access, and set stronger authorizations." I handed him a folded piece of paper I'd prepared. "These are the accounts I want locked. No joint holders, no linked cards, no exceptions." He read it, then looked up with a small nod. "Understood." "And the family trust?" I asked. He checked his screen. "It's inactive, but your son and his children are listed as future beneficiaries." "Remove it," I said completely. He hesitated only for a second. "You're sure?" I met his eyes. "I'm done being managed." He smiled. Not pity, not surprise, but respect. "Let's take care of it." The house felt different after that day at the bank. Not louder, not warmer, just mine again. I moved slower, deliberately, noticing details I'd ignored for years. The small crack in the window pane, the faint scent of lavender from the curtains, the way the afternoon sun pulled on the table like honey. Peace, I realized, doesn't always mean comfort. Sometimes it means clarity. 2 evenings later, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Melissa standing on the porch. She wore dark glasses and an oversized coat, as if she didn't want to be recognized. When I opened the door, she gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Eleanor," she said, using my first name for the first time in years. "Do you have a minute?" I didn't invite her in. I simply stepped aside. She entered carefully, scanning the room as if the walls might talk. "I know this is awkward," she began, setting her purse on the table. "David's been stressed lately. Business stuff, the new company. He's just trying to plan for the future. You know how it is." I turned on the kettle without answering. "You always said you wanted to help us build something lasting," she continued, her tone soft, measured. "That's what this is about. Legacy." "Legacy?" That word sat in the air like a sour note. "You filed paperwork to take over my accounts," I said evenly. Melissa froze. "We thought it would be easier in case anything happened. In case I died, you mean?" She forced a laugh. "Oh, don't be dramatic. We just wanted to make sure things were in order." I poured tea into 2 cups and set one in front of her. "You were hoping I wouldn't notice." "That's not fair," she said quickly. "No," I replied. "What's not fair is that I paid your medical bills, helped with your mortgage, and somehow you still thought you could erase me from my own life." Her cheeks flushed. She stood abruptly. "You'll regret this." I met her eyes. "No," I said softly. "For the first time, I don't think I will." When the door closed behind her, the silence that followed felt sacred. The next afternoon, I was sitting by the kitchen window when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made me pause. Anna. My granddaughter rarely called. At 17, she lived in her own fast world of friends, classes, and endless scrolling. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice light but a little forced. "Just checking in. How are you?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. What a nice surprise. Is everything all right?" A pause. "Yeah, I just thought maybe I could stop by later." I smiled to myself. "Of course, come whenever you like." When she arrived, she brought that restless energy teenagers carry, the mix of nerves and curiosity. She hugged me tighter than usual. I didn't ask why. I just baked cookies and poured milk, letting the kitchen fill with the smell of butter and sugar. We talked about school, her art class, and how she wanted to apply to colleges out of state. Then her expression shifted. "Dad's been acting weird," she said quietly. "He's upset about something with the bank." I stirred my tea. "He tried to take control of my accounts," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "Seriously?" I nodded.
He forgot that I know how to read fine print. Anna's face fell. I didn't know, I swear, Grandma. I just thought you liked helping them. I did, I said softly, until it stopped being help and started being expected. She looked down at her hands. Dad says you're being unreasonable. I'm being clear, I replied. There's a difference. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I stood and walked to the cabinet. From the top shelf, I took out a small folder and placed it on the table in front of her. On the cover, her name was neatly written. Anna Grant Education Trust. She stared at it, speechless. I don't understand, she whispered. You will, I said gently. One day. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for my hand. Thank you. I smiled. No, Anna. Thank you for reminding me what family is supposed to feel like. That night, the phone rang again. I didn't have to look to know who it was, David. I let it ring twice before picking up. Mom, he said, his voice sharp, breathless, already defensive. What the hell is going on? I just talked to the bank. They said you revoked my access.